Hi, this is Jim Janessi. Let's talk about Project 1.4 in Unit 1 of Contemporary Computing. This project deals with a little bit of analysis, what I call due diligence for buying additional data storage for a computer. What I'd like you to take a look at on page 38 is this first part of the assignment, which is called a primer on computer memory. This is kind of important for everybody to read to make sure you understand the difference between these three types of memory. Random access memory is what the computer has in it, that is, some chips associated with the motherboard, that the computer uses as its workspace. The important thing about this kind of memory is that it's fast, but also it loses its memory. The circuitry essentially shuts off and loses the bit patterns in it when power is removed. That's kind of a problem if you want to save some data and the machine is turned off. Hard disk memory is much larger than internal memory. This runs into the hundreds of gigabytes or more. Problem with it is, although it's fast, it takes a lot of power because there's a spinning metal disk, and it's fragile. Although hard disks can be built to be somewhat shock resistant, a hard disk is a very precise mechanical device. It is possible for it to fail in a catastrophic way and to destroy what's been recorded. This can happen through a variety of means: ordinary wear and tear after a few years, or dropping it, some severe mechanical shock, or an electrical shock like lightning striking the power line that your computer is plugged into. It's used widely, but it's wise to back up data stored on a hard disk. Backing it up to some other mechanism, perhaps another hard disk that's not always physically connected to the computer like a portable hard disk, or some sort of USB or cloud storage. And finally, USB flash drive is a fairly recent invention that is within the last 10 years. It's become popularized. The interesting thing about USB memory is that while it's entirely electronic and has no moving parts, it retains information after it's disconnected from a computer. It is possible to damage it with static electricity, for example, especially in a climate where in the wintertime the air is very dry. Static charges can build up just by walking across a rug. If you happen then to hold on to a USB drive and plug it in, a little spark between the USB drive and whatever you're plugging it into, you very well might have ruined the memory, shorted out the very tiny elements in there that retain the information, and all is lost. A USB drive is actually handy to convey information from one machine to another. It's not really recommended to make it your primary backup mechanism because it is fragile, and of course it's possible to physically lose it as well. These drives are rather small. So here's three types of memory. This assignment deals only with types 2 and 3. We're not looking here at memory that expands the RAM capacity of a computer. That's a different matter. That usually involves opening up a case, that is the system unit case or the laptop case, putting in additional memory chips if possible. That's not what we're looking at here. We're looking at an assignment where I'm asking you to do due diligence on acquiring more hard disk memory of either the fixed or portable variety and USB flash memory. USB flash memory could be composed of either dedicated USB flash drives or SD cards, which are used for memory in cameras and phones, or micro SD cards, which are used primarily in phones for additional storage, and placed into a small adapter. Those can also function as USB memory. The only difference really between a USB flash drive and an SD card is a small amount of interface circuitry that's supplied by an adapter that has a USB plug. That's why you can use SD memory or micro SD memory as a USB drive with an adapter. I'm giving you here an advertising from the Micro Center in Westmont. That's one of the favorite stores I have for buying all sorts of computer equipment. This ad appeared in the early part of 2011. What I've got here is an ad that has 4 different kinds of memory. In fact, you might even consider it 5 different kinds of memory, 20 different devices altogether. What you see here on this slide is flash memory, and there's 5 different capacities. SDHC cards, meaning SD high capacity, that means more than a few gigabytes. The HC came on when capacity went beyond 2 gigabytes and the addressing scheme internal to the device had to be changed. Earlier computers might not be able to use SDHC cards. They might only use SD cards. Modern devices can address the larger quantities of memory. And you can see these cards go quite high, 32 gigabytes, and in fact, now in 2012, perhaps even 64 gigabytes. SDHC cards, what's this? Kind of a duplication of what was above? No, actually, these SDHC cards you see mentioned here with extreme speed, you have to understand that the rate at which the circuitry can operate is measured in terms of classes from 1 through 10, and the higher the number, the faster the speed. For video, you need especially high-speed SD cards to record the information because it's coming pretty fast to record video imagery. So Class 10, extremely high-speed SDHC cards cost more, but they're the kind that you have to have for video recording. Sound recording could get by with cheaper SDHC cards, and ordinary still picture and data recording could use even the slowest SD cards, the least expensive ones. Micro SD cards are physically smaller. They're about the size of your pinky fingernail. These are the kind of very thin, small cards, although perhaps with great capacity, that you can typically plug into a cell phone. Micro SD cards have the advantage of a much smaller space required. The circuitry in them isn't any different than SDHC cards, it's just that the SDHC are physically larger, about the size of an ordinary postage stamp. Then we have hard disks. These are internal hard drives. That means they don't have a case that would allow them to just be carried around as portable units. These drives are all intended to be mounted inside of a desktop computer, or perhaps inside a laptop if they're especially small. The first one that you see, which is the SpinPoint 500 gigabyte 2.5-inch internal hard drive, might fit within a laptop, but the larger 3.5-inch size drives typically are for use in desktop computers. Not shown here are portable hard drives, where a little more circuitry and a case that's suitable for carrying around encases a hard drive like this, making it possible for it to be connected to a computer with a USB plug and be detached from the computer whenever you'd like to have the device carried between computers. So for carrying data between computers, you have several choices. For up to several gigabytes, a flash drive might work. For much more than that, and often for use as backups, some type of a hard drive, typically a drive as you see here, but encased in a portable case with the additional circuitry to make it possible to run it independent of a computer. So altogether there are 20 items here, and I've circled them on this slide. What I'm looking for you to do is to do what is called due diligence. That is to inform yourself with background information and specific information on various items that you might choose from to meet a need, so that you can make a reasonable decision based on facts. What I'm looking for you to do here is to meet this need. You want additional disk memory for a desktop computer and portable storage to carry information between computers. In order to do that, I want you to find the current price for each of the 20 products shown in the advertising that I've given you in this assignment. The prices that you see there are obsolete. The prices are probably lower now, although for disk drives they may be even higher because they're manufactured in Asia, and Asia had a lot of flooding in the last year, and it damaged some of the factories where these drives are made, so prices even had gone up on some types of disk drives within the last year. You'll have to do some research on Google to find these products and to find a current price for each one. Then I want you to compute the cost per megabyte, that is for each 1 million bytes of storage, and put it into a chart where the rows are the memory devices and the columns are the cost and computed values. Here's an example of what such a chart would look like. I haven't put any information into this. You would list the devices in the first column, the price that you've looked up for each device, and then the cost per megabyte of that device. And that cost is going to have some bearing on your decision for the types of storage that you would recommend buying. Now, it isn't enough to do just the chart. You have to support your purchase decision for each type of storage, that is for some hard disk storage and for portable storage. You have to support your purchase decision with facts, and you express your purchase decision in a narrative. That means you not only compose the chart, but then you use the chart to make a decision, and in a short narrative, you tell me why you decided to buy the items that you did, what the cost-benefit trade-off might have been in your mind between capacities and prices per cost per megabyte, why you might have chosen a certain size and speed of hard disk, why you might have chosen either flash drive or SD or micro SD devices. You might consider what you see at the top of page 39, which is an adapter that adapts an SD card to a USB connector, because you might have in mind transferring information in that way from a camera to a computer without having to go through some cable connecting those two devices. You'd also want to address the issue of speed. If you're thinking about SD storage, you might want to consider the use you intend to make of the SD card and whether speed would be a factor, therefore a factor in the price also of the memory that you'd like to acquire. Similar to the factual comparison that I describe on page 26, you'd want to organize this in such a way that you have a chart that amasses the data that you've gathered, and in this case you have to do a computation to get to a standard means of comparing these items, that is the cost per megabyte. And then you need the narrative to explain what sense you make of that chart and how it impacts your decision, what your decision actually is in terms of purchasing additional memory. So have at it. This is yet again an example of how you would apply some fact gathering and some thinking and then some recommendation on a purchase decision so that your decision is much more informed than simply perhaps an impulse buy or picking the first thing that you see that might serve a certain purpose.